Hello everybody, today I want to show you a game between Levan Aronian with the white pieces and Alexander-Grischuk with the black pieces. This game comes from the chess.com qualifier, and the time control was 5 minutes with the 2-second increment. The game started off e4 from Aronian, c5 from Grischuk, knight c3, closed Sicilian d6, knight f3, and the game quickly transposes into a g3 variation of the Nairov Sicilian. g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, d4, there it is. Now we have an open Sicilian. Knight takes d4, knight f6, h3, this is all standard, castle, castle, knight c6. This is not a very ambitious variation by white, as you can see. Black sets up his normal formation, especially if you play d6 as your response in the open Sicilian. You get like a safe dragon variation. Here, white just plans to gradually outplay his opponent by generating positional weaknesses, and sometimes he will throw the move f4 and try to generate a kingside attack. But play from white is usually quite slow in this regard. All right, it's not as crucial on a move-by-move basis as, say, your Yugoslav attack is concerned. Knight d5 is played, and Grischuk played rook c8, which is a good move. In these positions, black has to be very careful about playing knight takes d5 and allowing e takes d5. For example, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, queen takes d4. Great, black has gotten rid of several pairs of minor pieces. However, white is able to generate an initiative down the e-file by doubling up his rooks. And now, with this pawn here on d5, no matter what black does, he's going to end up with some type of isolated pawn after this pawn is traded off for the d pawn. Alright, so black has to be very careful. There are some situations where black should take on d5 there, but this doesn't seem like one of them, and Grischuk makes the right call. Rook c8, knight takes c6, and another good call, b takes c6, getting that piece out of d5. Aronian trades, knight takes f6 check. Bishop b6 could have been played, but that just leads to a repetition at the queen e8, knight c7, queen d8, and knight d5, and so on. Only a really enterprising player would risk giving up the exchange here with rook takes c7. So we don't even consider that. So a forced draw is possible if white wanted to draw here. Knight b6 is possible, trying to pick up the bishop here, but black is able to gain an initiative after bishop takes d4. Queen takes d4 here, c5, queen c3. Notice the pressure on the b file and on the b2 pawn in particular. And say after b3 and a move like rook fc8 or knight e5, black has absolutely nothing to worry about and actually can continue his assault on the queen side with moves like a5 with the idea of playing a4. Knight f6, bishop takes f6. Again, this pawn is under pressure. c3, c5 from Grischuk, queen c2, and now Aronian ramps up his attack on the queen side of the board. The problem with white in this game is that his play is very slow, whether he's trying to conduct a kingside attack as he starts with this move h4, or play positionally, is very slow. And black has easy play. He already has the open b file. His bishop is beautifully placed on the h8, a1 diagonal. And white is kind of drifting a bit. Rook b8. Now, this is a slight inaccuracy by Grischuk. Um, One of the reasons why is because one of White's main ideas in the Sicilian and many lines, especially these fianchetto variations, is to trade off the dark square bishop. It's a beautiful piece that black possesses, and Rook b8 allows just that. And the reason why is after bishop g5, the e pawn would be left on prise if black tried to just simply bring his bishop back. So therefore, instead of rook b8, bishop g7, or rook fe8, again protecting this pawn. So now with bishop g5, the bishop would just drop back, would be a little better. But remember, this is a blitz game, so we can't be too harsh in our critique, but I just wanted to point it out. So rook b8, bishop g5, and now bishop takes g5 is pretty much forced. So black loses his bishop, but at least he's able to inflict some damage to the pawn structure of white. Instructive moment here, c4. All right, fixing the potential weaknesses before attacking. What do I mean? Let's say if black played mechanically, play rook b6 with the idea of just playing rook fb8 and doubling up. This gives white the opportunity to mitigate his weaknesses on the queen side. So for instance, c4, rook fb8, b3. Now where's the attack? All of a sudden, black's pieces on the queen side become meaningless. They have to be repositioned now to have any meaning. The pawn on a6 needs to be pushed. That means the queen on a5 has to be moved and so on. Of course, this takes time, and with time, white can make good moves also. This is why you have to be careful. You don't want to attack a moving target. And a move like rook b6 would be doing just that. The target is still flexible. And if white is alert, he just has to make moves to prepare against the incoming attack. This is why c4 is a very strong move, because it guarantees play for black on the queen side, no matter what white does. f4. Aronian knows that he has to get some type of counterplay underway or else just be crushed on the other side of the board. Rook b6. Now the doubling comes into play. King h2. Rook fb8. Now Aronian is faced with the choice of playing passively with a move like rook fb1 or trying to break out with b4. He chooses the latter, b4. Again, it's a critical moment. If you play a move like queen a3, say queen c1 and queen a4, a3, again, your pieces on the queen side lose all of their meaning and purpose for being over there. All right, white has mitigated his weakness. This is why after b4, Grischuk played the correct move. C takes b3. A takes b3, attacking the queen, and now queen c5. All right, notice how the attack on the b pawn is still maintained. All right. And black's pieces on the queen side have meaning. Rook fb1. So now Aronian is being forced to protect these pawns on the queen side, and he still has the weaknesses to boot, especially on the dark squares on this king side. a5, again making sure those pawns on the C and B files are fixed. Another option was bishop e6, attacking the B pawn one more time. And I know I said earlier don't attack a moving target. Here, tactically, it works because if b4, then rook takes b4. And this is possible because of the precarious position of the white queen on c2. So therefore, after bishop e6, c4, and then a5. Again, fixing the target. And you will see that this is what happens in the game via a different move order. Grischuk played a5, rook b2, and then bishop e6, attacking the pawn again. This is why Aronian played rook b2, anticipating bishop e6, and now rook a b1. Now, at this point, we must mention that we all get to positions like this where we know we're better, but it's hard to figure out how to increase the pressure. Like, in other words, what do we do? Like, we know we're better, we have our opponent tied up, now what? All right, and here Grischuk is at that point in the game. All right, and he plays the move rook c8, just simply attacking the c pawn. Right, he's probing. See what he's going to do. Try to get the opponent to make more concessions. Okay, another plan that I had thought of when I was analyzing the game is this idea with king g7, because notice all of white's heavy pieces are on the queen side of the board. Black's queen on c5 cuts off um, the white king's entry to the g file. So I had this idea of king g7, h6, and I'll just show it to you. Let's pretend that black can move several times in a row so that I can illustrate this point to you. My idea was king g7, h6. Let's say g takes h6, king takes h6. Again, king g7, followed by rook h8, winning. That was another idea in the position. Well, to discuss the dilemma of what to do when you're in positions like this, this is where the principle of two weaknesses comes into play. And you will see example after example if you study chess where masters will be in position and they have piled up on a weak pawn or a piece or something, and now both players are at a standstill. There's 3 defenders, 3 attackers. Now what? All right, you have to find another place to attack or create another weakness in the position. And that's why this idea with king g7 popped into my head, because I realized that another weakness has to be created. So while white is completely tied down on the queen side, you attack on the other side of the board. All right, and that's where this idea of king g7 comes from. Rook c8 is good also, as it probes the position, because now how do you defend the c pawn exactly if you're white? Okay, do you play rook c1? Okay, rook c1. Then black just continues to increase the pressure on the pawn. Okay, and then let's say c4. And now you have this move a4, undermining the c pawn, right, and preparing to take with the rook. So for instance, b takes and rook takes. So back to the game. White's position is creaking, right? It's bending, but it's not broken yet. So after rook c8, Aronian opted for c4. Okay, and now Grischuk didn't rush. He just simply put the pressure back on the b file. Rook c b8. Bishop h3. Aronian is under a lot of pressure. He doesn't have too many things that he can do in the position. So he wants to alleviate the pressure, right? There's sacrificial themes that come up. For instance, bishop takes c4 and certain variations. So he wants to trade the pieces off. So bishop takes h3, king takes h3, and now excellent move by Grischuk. Queen e3. The queen move severely limits white's options by attacking many different points at once. The queen is pressuring, right, maintaining the pressure here on b3. The queen is also attacking this pawn at e4. Okay, the queen putting pressure on this diagonal, h6 to c1 diagonal. In other words, let's just say theoretically, white wanted to advance or thought about advancing. Now the g pawn is attacked. This pawn is pinned. All right, so it's almost putting almost putting white in some type of Zugzwang position. Right, the c pawn cannot advance. Right, it would just be captured. The b pawn can advance. All right, and this is what you want to do, is just tie the opponent down in these type of positions. Don't rush. Just figure out how you could just keep eliminating the counterplay from your opponent. King g2. What else? He's reduced to shuffling. Again, you're at the same crossroads. What do you do here? How do you increase the pressure? Okay, you really can't increase the pressure too much here, but rook b4. Okay, it's kind of like tennis. You just hit the ball back into your opponent's court. Now he has to come up with another move. Right? You got all this pressure on him. He has to come up with another move. And here, Aronian cracks under the pressure. He plays queen takes e2. Excuse me, queen e2. Now it's clear. You just take any 1500 player can look at this position now. Queen takes e2, rook takes e2, rook takes b3. And that's exactly what happened. Except instead of playing this move right here, right, which is playable, but allows more counterplay. Right. Nevertheless, black will still be in the lead. He played a powerful move, a4. Right. And here's another good point. Right. Instead of just capturing back, increase the pressure. Okay, sometimes the threat is stronger than the execution. But the point is that queen e2 was so egregious of a move by white, nearly 2800 grandmaster, that even a low-rated player could just spot that, okay, now I can win the b pawn. So just like that, all that tension in the position caused white to just make this move. An improvement, of course, was just to keep shuffling. King h3, hitting the ball back to black. But of course, black has all the cards, so you just play a move like queen d4. Now you have concrete threats. All right, and one of the threats here is a4. Notice that with the queen on d4, right, now you have three pieces converging on b2. All right, you had the two rooks on the b file and the queen on d4. So now a4 is a real threat. Once a4 is played, white is in real trouble. So, for example, say if he shuffles again, then you just play a4 and the position will collapse. If white tries to play rook a2 to prevent a4, now the b pawn has one less defender. So queen b6. Okay, and now if he tries to defend, say rook a3, a4. Again, you have this weak rook here. And that's how you cause a position to collapse. So in this game, queen e2 was played, queen takes e2, rook takes e2, and now a4. Now, desperado time by Aronian, e5, the pawn drops. Rook a1, and again, this is a blitz game, so rook b2 was played. There's clearly winning is this a3. It's better to hold on to that pawn. But he played rook b2. I mean, it's instinct to just get rid of the pieces. And now rook b4. E takes d6 by Aronian. E takes d6. King e4. And now we can look at this position and see that white's king is better here. All right, but the material and there's the position of those pawns for white, right? That's the downside of advancing your pawns early and trying to attack, is that now you're left with the weakness. Rook takes c4 check, king d5, rook c5, and this is so that Aronian can get behind the passed pawn, which is another principle. Rooks belong behind passed pawns. Rook a3. I'm sorry, so Grischuk could get behind the passed pawn. Rook a3 by Aronian, try to keep it from advancing. King g7. And now Grischuk's idea is to play moves like h6 or f6 to break open the king side. King c6, h6, king b6, rook a8, king b7, and now rook e8. Okay, planning on going into a superior ending without that a pawn. So now rook takes a4, h takes g5, f takes g5, and now rook e3. Rook g4, only way to defend. And it looks like, Aronian might be able to hold it. However, that one superior king is now in the bad spot in the corner of the board, and that really is what seals Aronian's fate here. King takes f6, king c6, and now the move g5, and that just prevents, like rook f5 check, for example. Rook c4, the pawn must fall. Rook takes g3, and this is a lost endgame for white. The reason why it's lost is because one, the white king will get cut off. We'll continue with the rest of the game. Rook c5, and there's no way to stop the pawn. In situations like this, the general rule is that the white king and the rook have to be, or black, whatever color you are, but the weaker side must be in a position where the rook and king can work together in order to stop the pawn. It can't be where just the rook is trying to stop the pawn or just the king is trying to stop the pawn. They have to be coordinated. And that's what all of that theory comes down to, about cutting the king off files and this and that. Is basically the idea is breaking the coordination between rook and king. They have to work together in order to stop the pawn. Okay, so at the rook c5 by Aronian, rook d3, this cuts off the this Grischuk cuts off the king. So king b5, because the rook is not going to be able to stop the pawn alone. King g6 and king c4, again trying to cross over. Aronian will not let him cross over. Grischuk will not let Aronian cross over the d file. Rook c7, and now king f5. Notice how the rook was first trying to blockade Grischuk from moving his king down, to the 5th rank, 4th rank, and so on. But the king is cut off, so now what does he do? The rook has to do all the work. The rook is not able to handle everything at once. King e4, king c3, and now the pawn starts to advance. And you're going to just end up with a simple lieutenant position. So here you can see the white king, Aronian, is cut off. The rook is not able to stop the advance of the pawn, and eventually you're going to get that lieutenant position where black is building a bridge and so on. One more thing, I just want to go back to before rook c5 was played, which was the weaker move. I mean, white is lost anyway, but a stronger move would have been king d5, and the idea is to basically cross over with the king to get the king involved. Okay, but the principle is still the same, and this is why it's a lost position, is because the king still gets cut off. So after king d5, simply king f5. Now how does the white king get over? Let's say, for example, rook c5, threatening some type of discovered check. The rook just goes to a3. Remember, the king still can't get over because black's king is in the way. Let's say rook c7, and then just simply rook a4. The reason why rook a4 is important here is because it just simply cuts off the It just simply cuts off the white king from being able to cross over the fourth rank. Um, White wants to play rook c7, excuse me, rook f7, and drive the king to the g file, and then march in triumphantly with the king. Of course, those are all pipe dreams. There's too many different methods to stop it from happening. But I just wanted to give you a vision of what White wanted to do. In this sample line, rook a4, rook f7, and then just simply king g4. Notice again in this variation, although the king has moved, the black king has moved, sorry, from the f file, the white king still can't penetrate because of the rook being on the fourth rank. And still the same scenario. All right, with the king being cut off, the pawn and the king marching up the board. Another after rook a3, rook c7. Another idea, instead of rook a4 is just simply checking. This forces the king to go back to the c file, and of course not c5, because then you would just trade off the rooks. And then for instance here you could just play a move like rook d8. In the same scenario, the king is cut off, you know. So as long as you understand those principles, like you'll be just fine. Rook f7. You just start marching up the board. And let's say rook g7, king f4, and notice how the rook is forced to try to do all the work himself, and he just can't. King g3, and I know this is simple for a lot of people, but just for my new chess players out there, you know, you would just slowly march the pawn in conjunction, you know, just switching between the F and G files with the king and pawn, and just march it up, because you need, if you're at the weaker side, you need the king to be involved. All right, so that is it for this video. Very instructive game, blitz game. And the thing is, don't be afraid to study blitz games, because Grandmaster Blitz games, the quality is very high in their games. And you can learn a great deal from the game. So I hope that you learned a lot. Please comment, like, subscribe, donate if you have some spare change. That would be greatly appreciated. And I hope to deliver some more instructive content. And I'll see you down the road.